Committee of the Council as a whole to order on Thursday, January 4th, 2015. Continue the budget hearings. Tonight on the agenda, we have Montechusett Regional Vocational Technical School, the airport, and community and development. We'll start off with Montechusett Regional Vocational Technical School on page 169. Dick, how do we divide this one up? Right, okay. Fitchburg's portion of the Montechusett Technical Schools budget for fiscal year 16, $1,974,212. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Tammy Crockett. I'm the business manager. I think I see all familiar faces around the table, so I think you're all familiar with me. I send regrets from Superintendent Dr. Harity. She left work ill today, so she's very sick, but she was hoping to be here with me this evening. But you get me. Yeah, I'll ask her to send one in. I sent ahead to everybody just yesterday, I apologize, a copy of the budget book, thanks to Anna's help, and the PowerPoint that I usually give. I'm not going to give you that whole PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Yes, I do get thank you a lot when I say I'm not doing that. I've actually prepared just some overarching comments about the budget, but I would be happy to go through anything more in depth that you read, or if you have questions of me, but I'm going to proceed that way. So, Monty Tech's total budget, and I'm just going to talk the budget. I think you've read the accomplishments, the goals. You know, Monty Tech is a fantastic school. All the students are from there are doing spectacular, and we're very thankful for the students we have. Our FY16 budget is currently projected to be $26,229,366. That's a $588,000, $533 increase from FY15, or 2.3%. That only is a net school spending budget. We are not proposing spending a dollar over our required net school spending. Once again, as we've done over the past couple years, we've actually fallen a little short over the past couple years. It's not a place we want to be. We're trying to be just at net school spending. And that's what this budget represents. What are some of the factors that goes into that increase? Our foundation enrollment increased by 19 students. So our foundation enrollment is 1,486. Now that is not the amount of students that currently are in Monty Tech. We actually have 1,435 students, but the foundation budget is based on the in-district students in Monty Tech as of October 1st, along with the school choice out students. So students that are from Fitchburg that are in a different vocational school, Leominster, CTE, Pathfinder, any of those. And also we have a Chapter 74 LPN program, which gets the students who are in district are included in the count. So that's what makes up that 1,486 foundation number. And along with that, our foundation budget per pupil is $15,280. And again, everybody's is different. There's a sample in the packet, in your PowerPoint, of how the foundation budget for Monty Tech is calculated. Again, it looks very different from the Fitchburg public school system because it's broken out. They give different values for grades, grade levels, special ed, free and reduced lunch numbers. There's a whole calculation that goes into that. And of course, high school vocational education gets the highest base, so it's the most expensive. I shouldn't say the most expensive. Special ed is the most expensive education. But for regular education, high school vocational education is the most expensive. So again, those are those are the numbers those are the factors that go into why our foundation increased. And again, our gross budget. And again, I said that's due to our net school spending increase. That was 2.2% this year. Our net school spending went up, or $496,000. So you can see that $500,000 consumes basically our whole budget increase. The next part of our budget increase was due to transportation cost increase, and the total transportation cost increase is about $100,000 this year. And there's a couple factors going into that. It's a new year in a bus contract, and the figures go up. And also, we had to add $60,000 into our special ed transportation budget this year for what we're anticipating the incoming freshman class needs may be. Some other specifics to our budget, because you might think that it seems like a very large increase, even though I say, again, net school spending. Some factors that went into that is we really could have, of course, if we went by the wish list and the wants of every department and the needs, would have been extremely lot larger, as we all know. But we are not adding any new FTEs in this budget. So there's no new staff. There's no staff leaving or no layoffs, but there's no new staff added to the budget. We also had to factor in that our current staff, under their contractual agreement, had a 2% increase. So that totaled about $300,000 of the increase. We also made some cuts to our technology budget this year in FY15. So we had to add back some funding for that. So a lot of our classrooms, our drafting, our info tech, our engineering, our business tech programs, they're all run with technology, and it's quite expensive to outfit classrooms, and they have to maintain those replacements every few years so that they keep up. Also this year, new to our budget, it's not new to your budget, but it's new to our budget, is the state retirement, I will say, caught up with us for the retirement assessment for the employees that are not teachers, who are not in the state retirement system, who are not in the teachers, retirement system, so the custodians, the support staff, et cetera. We should have been, and it's not just Monty Tech in this boat, since we joined the state retirement system when the district began, we should have been paying a retirement assessment for those people, as I'm sure you pay into your municipal retirement from the budgets for those people that are not in teachers. Well, for us, that is, so we have not paid for 40 years, 45 years, okay? They're not, and we're not alone. We're with about 25 other regional school districts that the state never built. And they just caught up with it this past year and said, we're going to forgive and forget because it was our mistake, everything in the past. But going forward, you need to begin paying this. And of course we do. It's our obligation to pay this. That is $205,000 a year for us. And it will only rise as people retire who are in that retirement system. So that's another $205,000 we had to build into our budget that we weren't expecting. The other thing that we're funding is we did the $10.7 million energy renovation project. You heard us talk about it, the rooftop units, the new lighting, et cetera. We pay for that equipment within our net school spending dollars. That's $790,000 a year. A lot of it, approximately $400,000 of it, is offset from the energy savings that we see because of the project. But again, we have to cuts in other areas so that we can keep paying for that. And that was so that we didn't have to come back to our communities to ask for any borrowing or any debt service. So we built it right into our net school spending figure. Another thing that's in this budget is we have $290,000 built into our capital budget. $250,000 of that is for renovation of the gym. That's the floor and the bleachers that have basically been there since the school was opened. The other 40,000 is we're proposing the transfer into the stabilization fund that we established this year in 2015 with 25,000 from this past budget. We are fully funding that, offsetting that 290,000 in capital with our E&D, as we have in the past. Our E&D was certified this year at $1,066,000. And we're using 500,000 of that to offset our assessments in total this year. So that's bringing our balance in E&D to 566,000. Excess and deficiency, it's your free cash. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Yes, it's the equivalent of your free cash, so it's like our savings account. And regional schools can hold 5% of their next year's budget. They can hold it in reserves because we can't easily go back to 18 towns. So to look if an emergency happens or something outside of the budget. So the regional schools are allowed to keep this in their reserves up to that 5%. So for us, that could be 1.3 million. What we're choosing, the school committee chose to put the 500,000, once again, leaving us at 2.2% in that account in our reserves. Once again, because we know the economics of the communities that we serve, and we try and to keep it. Fitchburg has a large increase as it is. We're trying to keep them as minimal as possible. So that being said, that's kind of the total of what's going on with our FY16 budget. What's going on with Fitchburg particularly is you're attributed with 412 students. So that's your foundation budget for Monty Tech at October 1st, 2014. And again, I remind you that that's not the number of pupils that Fitchburg has in Monty Tech. That number was 376. That includes the students who live in Fitchburg who school choice out to other vocational schools. Those get added into your number. And also, if you have any LPN students who are in the Chapter 74 program, those are added in. And so that's an increase of 9 students from the previous year. With that said, I attached in some of your documents, you can see how the state arrived, and it's in your PowerPoint presentation, how the state arrived at your minimum, your required minimum. They calculate it every year for the required minimum that Fitchburg needs to pay to Monty Tech and to the Fitchburg Public Schools. And that number for Fitchburg, based on the increase of 9 students, increased by 103,687. And if you'd like, I can go through that, but I did include it in your documents for your review. So of your $231,000 increase, 104,000 of it basically came right from the state that said this is your required increase. The remaining $100,000 that's in the increase is in the transportation side of our budget and those other costs. That amount increased, and let me back up a step. The budget I'm presenting you is based on the governor's numbers. We know there's been a few iterations since we've gone through the Senate and the House, and it has conference committee, and some of our numbers have changed slightly, but we have to go with the governor's numbers really because we put this budget together in March. We had our first town meeting at the end of March, so those are the numbers that we have. So the numbers that I'm presenting to you here are the governor's numbers. We, as you know, in years past, even when it changed significantly for us, we kept it the same and dealt with it in the following year and just made you aware early so that you don't vote on a number or put it into your budget and then we come back trying to change it. That's not, we've already had 15 town meetings. We're not looking to go back to change people's numbers. So unless some drastic change, these would be the numbers we would live with. Again, unless there was some drastic change. So the revenue side of things that we're looking at, I told you that our net school spending number increased by 500,000. All we're receiving in additional revenues towards that is $30,000 in additional Chapter 70 money, which is $20 per pupil. That's the minimum that they give. The rest, the state is assessing the communities. That's when I say don't shoot the messenger on that one, for the additional amount. And then along with that, in our transportation, I told you those amounts are going up. And also in the governor's version of the budget, our Chapter 71, or our regional transportation funding, was less than what we were projected to get this year. Slightly. So that's the number we're going with. In some of the other iterations of the budget, the House and the Senate, they're putting a little more regional transportation money in. But we always remain cautious with that money, because this past fiscal year, the year we're in, they put in a large increase to regional transportation. And then when the state budget, when they realized they had a deficit, one of the first 9 C cuts they made was to regional transportation. So we always kind of play on the conservative side, and if we do get the additional, we roll it into E&D and we give it back to the communities in the following year, as we've proven several years for the past that we're always putting our E&D back to offset assessments. So that being said, the increase in the transportation with the changes in the revenue sources and whatnot was a $355,000 increase on that side of the equation this year, and Fitchburg, representing 27% of that, saw that $100,000 increase in that line. So that's where we come to the total assessment of $1,974,212. It represents to Fitchburg, to your tax base, $4,792 per pupil. That comes from Fitchburg's tax base for a pupil at Monty Tech. That the additional, the rest of the funding that we use, because we spend $15,280 per pupil, comes from Chapter 70 that we receive on behalf of Fitchburg, and what we're using for our E&D. So we try to be, as you know, I'll throw out a couple of facts that we're really proud of. Our graduation rate is 98.2%. We had a dropout rate this past year of 0.3%. We had our Cyber Patriot ROTC group took first place in their competition, and we have several successful students at Monty Tech. So we really try to give you the most bang for your buck, and once again, keeping it at net school spending. We try to work with the community to be very reasonable. With that being said, I guess I will open myself to the questions that you have.
Okay. I guess I'll start just real quick. You said there's a 2% increase.
Yes.
Is that for teachers and staff?
Yes, that was all.
That includes everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the other one, which really doesn't have a lot to do with your budget, but I'm astounded. I wanted to see if you have an answer here. Where you said for 45 years you weren't paying into the retirement for the non-teachers, and the state waived that, and you have to start doing it now. Is the state making up that money?
The state paid it all along. The state was
Right,
paying it.
but you weren't paying your portion.
We were not.
So they're adding in your portion.
They paid our portion for 45 years. So what it is.
For you and a whole bunch of other schools. Okay, I'll do some research on it and get some numbers, but chunk of change for
It's
somebody.
up there.
That's a chunk of change for somebody going, oops.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, our 205,000 per year is certainly not the largest. And the regional schools that are represented in this, I believe we encompass about 60 or 70 communities within the state. So so what it is, the state, you know, if you retire and you get a pension of $40,000, a piece of it is the piece you put in as the person retiring that you paid in. That's your annuity. Then that might be $5,000 per year of it. The $35,000 of that is your pension, which the state, the municipal, Worcester County assesses each community, each school, every place, that portion. Sometimes it's on a percentage of payroll basis. There's different factors into how they do it. So since the school voted to become part of the state retirement system, when they basically opened the doors, that portion has never been billed to the school.
Okay.
Yay, thanks, good for us, but, again, it's a requirement under the
Answered my question.
Chapter 32B, we have to pay, but there's several out there, you'll find it.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Counselor Boishman?
On the school fund,
Yes.
you have 377 students coming from Fitchburg. Are any going to a different school from Fitchburg, going to a different school like they are?
You have 26 students who live in Fitchburg who go to different vocational schools.
So if you have 26 students, well, my question is this: do you replace those 26 with 26 more students from Fitchburg? Yes or no? So to make it 377?
No, a 377 is actually the amount of students who live in Fitchburg that are physically in the building at Monty Tech. But 26 others, for whatever reason, chose to go to a different vocational school.
Counselor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. President. Have each of the districts approved these budgets?
Yes, to date, we do have unanimous approval. And again, I think it's because we are at the required net school spending number and not
Okay.
above. So I feel like they're probably, there is no really place to go. Or
But Fitchburg has approved this, so the Fitchburg representatives
Oh,
serving.
our school committee?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I say that only because I'm a little disappointed that we have no members here tonight to discuss that. I wish that a member or a couple of the members could have been here for
Yeah,
tonight.
I am actually surprised not to see them because I know they had.
I would have
talked
liked
about
to have heard what they had to say. Police in the building?
We do have a school resource officer,
One.
yes.
Okay.
He's a Fitchburg police officer, and we pay to the city of Fitchburg for his service.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding the Monty Tech budget? Counselor Boishman?
Remember I asked you a couple of questions, if you could
Yes.
repeat those questions so
Absolutely.
the council, see if they really like, I like to have that information on that, how many students are going to college.
Yes.
If your students that graduate, are they full-time employees, not working for a temp agency or a work-a-day program, but actually working for a company with benefits and everything else? What was the other one I asked you? You wrote them down?
Yep. The other question that you'd like me to get back in, what I will do, I told the counselor, is I will answer his questions. I will send them to you, Anna, if you don't mind, and have you dispersed to the entire council so that everybody can be addressed to everybody. So we do one-year follow-ups. So we first we know where our kids are going when they graduate, or where they tell us they're going. Percentages to college, which were around 60% going to college. And whether they're going in the military, and we have it broken down by 2-year, 4-year trade schools, going directly to work that's related to their trade, not related. So we have all those statistics, and then we are required to do a 1-year follow-up on students. So I will get those documents and send those out to the committee. The other question was, how many students are we looking at taking for this up-and-coming school year? So what happens is, I'll give you a brief synopsis of how the admissions process works. At April 1st, that's when we take a look at accepting the students for the up-and-coming school year. How we determine what number quota, and again, it's based on the district agreement, each town or city gets, is we set a quota for the freshman class. So this year, we have a range, it's like 350 to 370 that we'll be taking for our new freshman class. Each town, based on, you have a capital apportionment percentage that you have, which is based on your total students in grades 1 through 12, divided by the total students in the entire 18 district school attending children. And you get a percentage. So for Fitchburg, that percentage for this year is 24.24%. So right off the bat on April 1st, Fitchburg's quota number is approximately 24% of the incoming class. We hold those seats, and so that happens for every town. Whether they're a percentage, 10%, 5%, you can see in the documents I gave you on the ratio comparisons, you can see what percentage each community is. What happens is we hold those slots open to each town from April 1st to June 1st. And if a town if they have 10 slots and only 8 apply, so they still have 2 empty slots, we keep it open till June 1st in case some students apply. After June 1st, every town or city, well, it's the towns really, that does not send they don't have enough students coming to meet their quota. Like Harvard, for example, has a quota of like 14 slots. We might get 1 or 2 applications. Those 12, 13 slots after June 1st become available. Then what happens is we just go down the waiting list, irregardless of the town that the student lives in. It's no longer based on town. So that's how a community, you might have a quota of 25 students for the freshman class, but you could end up with 40 because of the additional slots. So that's what you wanted me to take a look at, is where you're at. And because we're after the June 1st date, I'll kind of have a feel for how many slots are available at this point. And I was going to provide you how many applications we had received from Fitchburg students, so you can kind of get a feel for that. Yep.
And my final question.
Yes.
What are your criteria for applying for, rumor on the street, this is street talk, saying that you pick the elite, and the guy or the girl or boy has trouble, difficulties in school, can't get in because you're picking the elite. Is that true?
No. We have a state-approved admissions policy, and actually, if you go on the Monty Tech main website, under school committee, you'll see their policy. And off the top of my head, I don't know what the lettering is, but you'll find our admissions policy, and it outlines it completely. Now, there's different criteria that goes into a student being accepted, because of course we'd love to accept everybody that applies, believe me. But what there is there's a grade range. So if you have certain grades, A's, B's, you get a certain amount of points. And I apologize for not having all the details of it, but again, it's right on our website. If you have B's, you get, 1B, 1C and B's, you get there's a numeric rating, okay, for different grade levels. Then there's a different grade, numeric rating for attendance. So many absences equals this number less etc. Then you have discipline and conduct. No suspensions, you get graded. Then we also, the guidance counselor of the sending school that student comes from gives the student a rating, and they get a numeric grade based on that. And then we have an admissions officer, a person who personally interviews every single student that applies and gives them a rating. You know, why do you want to come to my TAC? What are you looking for? And gives them a numeric rating. And then they take everything combined, and that goes into their scores. There's a minimum. It's a 45 is a score. That's the minimum score to come in. We rarely ever have students, I'm saying if one a year, that'd be a lot, who wouldn't come in because they didn't meet the minimum score. They're just competing depending. If you live in Harvard and you have a score of 80, or a score of 46, you're coming in because they don't have a lot of students apply. Fitchburg happens to be very competitive because there's a lot of applications. Other towns, it's very competitive only because of the sheer amount of applicants applying. But I'll be happy to point you, and I'll send you a copy of our admissions policy, just so you, and this is something we have to give to the state, and they approve. And it's, except for minor changes in the numeric value system, it's pretty much the admissions policy of every vocational school in the state. So it has to be considered fair on state standards.
Any other questions or comments regarding the Monty Tech budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I thank you for all of your support and for having me here.
Okay, moving forward to the airport, page 189. Good evening.
Afternoon.
Airport Personal Services, $226,696. Airport expenses, $736,188. Total airport, $962,884.
Yes.
Good evening. Any comments? sir?
First of all, I did want to make a note that on page 186, there's a typo under airport total revenue for FY16. It was 692,884. It should be 962, not 692. All the other numbers are correct.
Total revenue, top one,
Yes.
should be 962,884.
662,881. It was typed in as 692,884, and we just discovered it. 962,881.
Okay.
Okay. We have several projects going on at the airport right now that most of you are aware of. They're going to cost some money in FY16. The first being the airport terminal building. 95% of that is covered by a Massachusetts Department of Transportation grant, but that other 5% is going to come out of the airport. We also have an aviation easement project, which is a contraction of aviation navigation, that's allowing us to obtain easements on the properties around the airport to prevent and eliminate vegetative obstructions. And along with that is the tree removal process that's part of that. That is reflected in the line item for airport improvements at $150,000. That number was $13,000 last year and $150,000 this year. That's the reason for the large increase. Most of the other line items are very similar to last year's numbers. Once the terminal building is built and we have the vegetative obstructions removed, we're expecting an uptick in takeoffs and landings and resulting fuel sales. So the number for fuel sales and fuel expenses has also gone up from the previous year. Most other line items are the same. So very simple. I'll open it up to any questions.
Questions or comments regarding the airport budget? Counselor Joseph.
How are you gonna get the expected revenue increases? Is that, you're going from 845 to 966?
Yes, once, we're expecting an increase in traffic with the new terminal building. The current building hampers a lot of traffic coming through there. We used to get, in previous years, a lot of commercial corporate traffic, corporate jets. Corporate jets buy a lot of fuel. That fuel, the jet fuel has a higher profit margin than our aviation fuel does for the general aviation. Because there's no pilot lounge, because there's no meeting room, because of just the condition of the building, a lot of the businesses that used to come to the airport are staying away. The other reason that there was a decrease in corporate traffic was because of the vegetative obstructions are limiting the night instrument approaches. Once those obstructions are removed, the instrument approaches get turned back on, and the new terminal building is built. We're expecting a return of previous years to our level of jet traffic. One thing that I should caution is when you look at the dollar values for the fuel, you have to consider that the price of fuel fluctuates greatly. On July 1 of this fiscal year, the price of gas was $6.31 a gallon. On the last day of this fiscal year, it's going to be $5.04 a gallon. It went down considerably, and that's why that number is lower than we had hoped. It's trending back up, so that number is also going to increase. What I look at to consider the health of the airport is, instead of the dollar value, it's the number of gallons sold. And over the last 3 years, it has increased from 59 to 64,000 gallons. And we're expecting that increase to continue with the improved approaches and the new building.
When do you anticipate the new building being complete?
The contracts, we have the contractor picked. We should have the contracts signed this month. They can start construction anytime after that, and we're looking at about a 9-month completion time.
So I'm just worried about your revenue projections, that while you're going to have upheaval and probably more limited access to your lounges and your restaurants and all that stuff, are more people maybe going to stay away for the next 9 months as opposed to come here for the next 9 months until it's completed?
Well, it is optimistic. It is optimistic. We've looked at previous year projections, and we think that we will be able to do that. One thing that you also have to consider is that if our revenue goes down, our expenses also go down. If we sell 10,000 less gallons of avgas, that's 10,000 less gallons of avgas we have to buy. So that number goes down as well. Joe Posnick and I have looked at these numbers pretty hard, and we are confident. It's going to be tough, but we are confident that we can make these numbers.
What happens if you don't? I'm just sorry if I'm.
No, that's fine.
The main thing is the airport improvements. You've anticipated that you're going to do $130,000 more and $137,000 more in airport improvements, and that's the.
That's to cover our share of the navigation easement and the tree clearing projects.
Okay, that's not something that you can not do, right? I mean,
Correct.
that's something that you're contracted into doing.
Correct.
What's that going to equate to in job loss if you don't get that revenue?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by?
You have to come up with that revenue somehow. If you don't have that revenue, then you're gonna probably have to lay off people, or how are you gonna?
We're already at minimum staffing right now. I wish we had more people. There's things that we could do if I had another full-timer that we just can't do right now. We have contingencies built into other projects, money that can be moved out of other projects into that if need be, but we are confident that we're going to be able to make those numbers.
Okay. More confident than I would be right now with, not because of the airport, but because you're going to be going through a major renovation, and it's just, I can see that happening.
the renovation-
9 months from now. I know, you're gonna have side-by-side buildings.
They're gonna be
and all
side
of
by
that.
side, and the plan, the building plan, even to how we repave the parking lot is gonna be done in such a way to minimize this impact. So our staff, the restaurant, the flight schools, all of those are gonna be up and running at full speed while the other building is being done next to it. There's gonna be no disruption in service. In a couple of years, if I'm still the manager here, I'm gonna come to you with a, to repave one of my runways. That's gonna be a disruption in service, because we're gonna have to close the runway for 6 months. That we're gonna have to have a plan in place on how to deal with the decrease in revenue. This project is, staged in such a way as to cause, as little, loss in revenue as possible.
But I'm just, for the next 9 months, you're going to be operating at a $845,000 revenue. And then for 3 months, you'll probably be operating at the $962,000. So I just don't see how with everything.
The big thing is the night approaches. Those are gonna get, at least one of the runways is gonna be reactivated, this year, this calendar year. So that's gonna be the big thing. When a corporate flight department is looking to fly into an airport, they're looking at two things. They're looking at the length of the runway, and they're looking at the availability of approaches. Right now, we have a 4,500 and 10-foot runway. A lot of insurance companies just say, no, you can't land on anything less than 5,000 feet, or we're gonna jack your rates up. So they go to Hanscom or they go to Nashua. The runway project is gonna correct that. The other thing that they look at is the limitations to the approaches. If we have to fly in there at night, we can only do a visual approach and not an instrument approach, so no, we don't want to even want to try that. That's going to get the corporate pilots back in here. It's going to get the corporate aircraft back in here. The corporate aircraft is what buys, they buy gasoline, they buy jet fuel at 400 or 500 gallons at a pop. All right, as opposed to general aviation aircraft that buy it at 40 to 50 gallons at a pop. If we can get those approaches reactivated with this tree clearing project, that's going to provide the majority of the increase in revenue we anticipate we're going to be able to get.
By when?
Probably
Is that
November.
calendar year? November?
November.
All right. Thank you.
Counselor Caddy.
It looks like you changed fuel providers this year.
Yes.
What was the reason for that?
Our contract was up, and we shopped around with different providers, and we were able to get a better price and better benefits by switching from Phillips to Shell.
What would the benefit be? You said better prices and better benefits. What do they provide you for
We're
benefits?
getting newer trucks, newer vehicles. We've had a lot of maintenance issues with our old truck. The trucks are owned by the fuel companies. They're not owned by the airport. And our current Avgas truck is a 1992 Ford model. And we've had a lot of maintenance issues where we have had the fuel truck has been down for a couple of days, and we've had to get a rental truck from Phillips, and Phillips has charged us for the rental truck. The Shell truck is going to be newer. I believe it's a 2010 model. The jet fuel truck is going to be newer. The cost of fuel that we've tracked over the last 6 months that we've been working on this is about 15 to 20 cents per gallon less. And we'll be able to increase our profit margin a little and lower the price a little for the customer, which helps get more fuel in. Phillips has, a number of years ago, Phillips, the contractor that Phillips uses is called World Fuel, and World was bought out by Ascent, or Ascent was bought out by World, I'm not sure. And there have been some customer service issues. I've talked with several other airports in Massachusetts that have switched to Shell from World Fuel, and they're much happier with Shell. So I use that as, when I say benefits, I'm saying better customer service, newer equipment, cheaper gas.
Thank you.
Counselor Bezal.
So if I'm looking at this correctly and following what Councilor Joseph said, you're buying $92,000 more in fuel, and the expected revenues of those is is $117,000 additional to what it was this year.
Yes.
If you don't need that fuel, you're not going to buy it.
Correct.
So the expense side goes down, the revenue side goes down accordingly.
Right.
So worst case scenario, you're probably going to do exactly what you did this year. The other question I had for you is, so it sounds like you're going to get this brand-new building in there, and it sounds like you're making the necessary improvements so that this thing's going to be up and running, we're going to be able to land. But one of the things you said was that you're going to have it increases night landings. Is there a restriction on what time right now presently jets can take off and land in Fitchburg?
No, there's not.
Okay.
No, there's not. Well, there's not a restriction by the airport. The FAA, because of the trees that are growing in the approaches, have said that any landings at Fitchburg at night have to be VFR, which is visual flight rules. Instrument flight rules, you're relying entirely on instrument. The margin of error is a lot smaller, and they say if you have vegetative impairments, then no, you can't do the instrument approaches. So the jets can still land, but they would have to descend to an altitude, in which case the airport becomes visible, cancel their IFR approach, and then land VFR. A lot of corporate jets, they don't like to do that. They can do it. The runway's long enough, the runway's wide enough, but most corporate flight departments and most insurance companies say you have to be able to do this in order to land at an airport. And that includes instrument approaches.
Because my only concern would be, especially with the jets, is there's a lot of communities now that have restrictions on when they can take off and when the airport opens in the morning to jets. I wouldn't want somebody to get a call at 11 o'clock at night saying, hey, I just had a jet fly over my house, woke up the kids, woke up the dog, woke up the whole neighborhood.
Most restrictions that communities place on jet aircraft is usually 11 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. Most corporate jet aircraft do not fly at that hour because a CEO isn't going to be up at 3 a.m. On a jet. One other thing that you have to consider is that 30 years ago, the number of takeoffs and landings being conducted at Fitchburg Airport was about 120,000 per year. Takeoff, an aircraft operation is a takeoff or a landing. That number nationwide has decreased, and the number at Fitchburg is down to about 62 to 65,000 a year. So even if we get these approaches turned back on, even if we get the longer runway, you're never going to see an increase back up to the number that the city of Fitchburg has already experienced. I think with a new runway, a new terminal building, better access through the approaches, we can probably get about a 10 or 15% increase in jet traffic and a corresponding increase in general aviation traffic. It's never going to get back up to the numbers that it was in the early 80s.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question.
This is about the city airport commissioners. Are they all set and on board with this?
Yes, they approved this budget at the last commission meeting. I should have mentioned this earlier. Commissioner Posnick apologizes for not being here tonight. He's traveling on business. He's currently in Atlanta. So here by myself.
Thank you, Scott.
And Councilor Di Natale.
Scott, a couple of weeks ago, the airport came to me, as well as one of the premier businesses at your airport, about the building where there's going to be an expansion of office space.
Yes,
I think it's
Hangar 7.
Hangar 7, thank
Yes.
you. And the information I received from your office and from the customers is that we have been wanting to have this hangar renovated since last June,
A little bit later than that, it was August.
August. Where do we stand right now on that?
The last, right now, nothing is being done. We want to get it done. I had hoped it would be done by now. It's a construction project that has to go through purchasing. And I have contacted purchasing several times, asking for assistance on what needs to be done, what forms I need to fill out. A lot of times I have gotten no response. The last time that I spoke with the purchasing department about this, they said that nothing would get done on Hangar 7 until after the contracts were signed for the terminal building, and that if I wanted to work on the Hangar 7 project, I would have to get a letter from the mayor telling purchasing to stop working on the terminal building and to start working on Hangar 7, and that it would delay the terminal building project.
So we're going on 10 months now?
Yes.
At what point do the customers say, I'm leaving? Because this is impacting their business.
It certainly is impacting their
And it's
business.
impacting the airport.
It certainly is impacting the airport, because when planes fly into this maintenance facility, after their maintenance is done, they buy fuel from us, and right now they're not doing that. So it is impacting the airport, it's impacting the facility.
Were you offered training? Were you responded to in a timely fashion? Or, because I recall from your messages, you would go to voicemail and you wouldn't hear back for weeks.
I would send emails to purchasing department.
Just keep this to the budget, please.
This is about the budget.
This is not
Thank you.
about the budget. Thank you.
Anyway, I would like to know if,
To the budget, please.
Counselor, if line of questioning is okay, but make it in relationship to the budget, how this is impacting
if the
them.
operations at the airport are being significantly hampered because of one particular department, that impacts the revenue, that impacts the tenants that pay the bills. That is why I'm talking about it. You might be gone for some time, Counselor, because I'm not done yet. Anyway, well, don't listen to it. You don't have to. That impacts the operations of the airport. You are the first department head to give us an accurate assessment of the ridiculousness in that office. And I, unlike others here, I'm not going to take it. Are we going to let the airport decline because of this? One's okay with it. He doesn't apparently hear what I got to hear every day. From you, from Chief Roy, from Mr. Jordan when he left, from Mr. Laxo, no firebrand himself. I've had it, Mr. Ellis, and this is not directed at you. 10 months, and we've got your biggest tenant who has told me that they are ready to walk out because they can't get their certification without this project. And that's the answer you get. And the answer I get is it's your fault. We have this meeting next Monday, and I'm sorry, if I get in trouble for this, I don't care. This is about the budget because every department in this city is getting hurt. And if no one's going to stand up and talk about it because the taxpayers pay these salaries for something that's not getting done, maybe if I cause a big enough stink, it will. And everybody else is free to leave too. I don't really care. I will keep speaking about it until something changes.
To answer your question about the budget, the damage to the building has caused us to decrease the rent that we can collect from that building. The space that's damaged is unrentable, so we have lowered Twin City Airmotive, that's the business, where we've lowered their rent to reflect the space that they're no longer able to use. I don't want to get.
No, don't. You don't have to. I'm almost done.
Okay.
I am not going to apologize for my tone or how I'm getting. I've been here 8 years. I'm hearing it every day. I'm sick of it, and it's impacting a business, and it's impacting a private business.
Yes, it is.
When I be told that there's no responses for months, and that it takes 10 months to even have you understand what you need to do, that infuriates me. Others here don't want to handle the truth, so I guess I'm going to have to hold the flag again and be the jerk. And I wear that with a badge of honor. I can't wait till Monday evening. I'll tell you that right now. Because if I don't say something, no one's going to say anything. So I very much apologize for what you've had to go through and your staff, because you are not alone. And you're going to continue to be ignored unless someone starts standing up for the taxpayers and for the people who run this city. Thank you.
Scott, following up on that, if you've said you've reduced the rent amount for that, is that reduction in rent amount reflected in this budget?
Yes, it is.
So if that project is completed and you can increase the amount of rent that you were to receive.
It'll increase the rental revenue by about $10,000.
Okay, so that $10,000.
Ballpark.
Well, Councilor Joseph was worried about the revenue and the expenses, and if that happens, that gap will get a little bit narrower.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the airport budget? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Now, moving forward to community development, page 78. I didn't mark this one. They've got here for administration personal services. This here. Okay. Okay. Councilors, I'm going to read from page 75 for the total, because this budget does have some different pages and some different departments within it. We're looking at community development, administration. No, thank you. Administration. 90,097. Economic development, 99,883. Planning division, 90,407. Housing and Development Division, 73,031, for a total of 353,398. And then we can go over to page 78, which will give you a breakdown of the administration and community development. Then you have economic development, and then on page 80, you have planning, personal and expenses, and you have community development and housing, the personal services and expenses. Questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Casassa, anything you'd like to say before the councilors start asking questions?
Well, I would just say that this is the first year that the Community Development Department was reconstituted in full based on the city ordinance after a couple of reorganizations. The budget essentially is unchanged, with the exception of the negotiated changes in personnel salaries and with the filling of the two vacant positions of Economic Development Director and Housing and Development Director that took place during the year.
Questions or comments? Councilor Bezal.
Thank you. Larry, so under the community development, the housing and development division, most of the salaries out of that are paid by grants.
That's correct.
I guess my fear has always been when I see something like that is, so what happens if we don't get the grants? Do we lose these people, or is it just always, I'm a little leery when we have grants that actually we have tied to people within our city, because what happens if we don't get the grants?
Absolutely. There are no guarantees, although I will say that the Community Development Block Grant Program, which is provides the foundation of support for most of the staff that are listed, is a program that's in its 41st year. So it's been a pretty steady and pretty reliable source of revenue. That said, the political climate certainly has changed nationally, and there are no guarantees. And certainly one of the responsibilities that we have as a community development department, because we don't have a perfunctory role in local government, we don't collect taxes, we don't assess properties. What we do is try to implement added value types of projects that support community development and economic development in the city, so it falls on us to also find additional revenue to pay for that work. And there is a recognition that if that means that we don't raise sufficient revenues to pay for those staff, that we will lose them. But we've been successful over the years, and we are reasonably confident that we'll continue to be.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Joseph?
I know we've got some new divisions, new things, a lot of things going on, okay, in this group. What metrics is gonna be set up to measure the success of this group? You know, I know it's not gonna be something that's gonna happen overnight, but how are we gonna what kind of reporting can we look forward to from this group to find out what their activities are and what their successes are, or what their plans are, so that we can just see something coming out of this tangible that we're going forward. I mean, we're going forward because we have these positions, and I really like that, but I just want to know, how are we going to measure the success, or what are we going to look for? What can we look forward to as counselors to see the success of that group?
Well, I guess there are a number of different gauges that you can use. One, of course, is the CDBG action plan, and, you know, we go through a process every year where we solicit input from citizens, from the city council and the mayor, and we try to allocate resources to projects that will have a significant impact or leveraging benefit on the city. So the emphasis on what we're looking to see from those activities is based on what our priorities are. You know, we want to see demolition of existing properties that are in poor condition or that pose a threat to abutting properties and lower property values. We want to see improvements to our streetscapes, particularly the major entryways to the city. We continue to pursue grant funds to keep our park system up in top condition, which has certainly been a metric that you can look back on and say, wow, there's been really quite a bit of improvement in that area. In the area of economic development, as you know, we have a new economic development director. I know she's met with each one of you individually, and she's meeting with a lot of other community and business leaders, and I anticipate that we will be meeting with the council regularly once she has a chance to take stock of everything that she's heard and is ready to provide at least an outline or strategy back to the mayor and council about what positive steps we can take to start increasing our tax base and encouraging more business investment and sending out the message that we're a business-friendly community.
I guess I need to see that we're gonna start tooting our own horn, you know, that the housing and is going to start showing that our housing stock is improving, that we have less vacant buildings, you know, that kind of stuff is stuff that they're working very actively on, getting people accountable for their buildings, you know, and I see a lot of things happening, but I would like to see that measurement of success so that we can start saying that we are moving forward in Fitchburg.
I was negligent in not mentioning housing
Yep.
as part of the strategy, and the NICE task force has been meeting regularly, and as you know, it includes several department heads who are trying to work in better coordination to address some of the most serious housing problems. And the new Housing and Development Director, Liz Murphy, chairs those meetings, and I know several city councilors try to attend when they can, just to bring to our attention areas that they want to see us focus on. We don't have the same kind of resources that we used to have for housing because of the cutbacks that there were. So we can't pay for the comprehensive rehab of a lot of properties. What we can do is try to be creative with the money that we have, and one of the activities we're funding this year is an activity that the Fitchburg State University has agreed to contribute matching funds for, as well as the Twin Cities CDC, and we're using block grant funding to do exterior type improvements and to sort of create a competition in some of our older neighborhoods so that we can hopefully get owners excited about getting their houses painted, getting landscaping work done, so that we can at least have a significant curb appeal improvement in certain areas if we can get that, solicit that kind of participation. It'll probably take place in the college neighborhood, and it'll probably be done in coordination with the Working Cities Grant for the North of Maine initiative, because they have people with boots on the ground to knock on doors and to get, hopefully get owners excited about participating in that program.
Okay. Counselor Tran?
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry, the last time you came before the council, you were in a transition mode. You didn't assume the position of a director of the department yet. Has that happened?
I was appointed by the mayor and council as acting director of community development. My long-term plans, after having worked for the city for almost 32 years, are that I probably will be retiring fairly soon. So I don't know that a formal confirmation at this point is a process that is necessary. I would anticipate that when I'm ready to announce my retirement, that I will inform the mayor, and we will begin a process similar to the one that we used for hiring the economic development director, and have asked the council president to appoint a member of the council and get other community representatives on a search committee so that we can begin that process.
Well, that's really disappointing to hear, because you've been a great asset to the city. You've done many things for the department, and by having that title, acting director, for many months, I would have assumed by now you would have been confirmed or appointed to take over that position by now. I would rather see you assume that position before you retired. With that being said, I have a question on the Economic Development Division. The new economic director and I had a pleasant one-on-one meeting about a month ago, and we picked each other's brains and we shared many ideas. I know Mary Jo is fairly new to the department. I was wondering, are there any initiatives going on in regard to economic development that you would like to share with the council?
Well, Mary Jo came a little bit late to the meeting because she was working late right now on putting together a small grant application for a placemaking grant through Mass Development that they're making available. And these are just small grants, and we don't anticipate a big impact from them. But it's part of a process of working with Mass Development, because it's anticipated that they're going to be the recipient of some larger state funding for gateway cities for economic development. And the implication that we've gotten from them is, if you want to be considered for the bigger grants, you need to work with us and show that you're developing a program to help market your community better. So I don't know if you want her to speak to that now, but certainly we'd be happy to share that with you. She's still at the point, though, where she's still meeting with people, and she's still trying to get a gauge on how to put together a sort of a plan of action that she can then come back to the council with. And I anticipate that that'll happen in the next 2 or 3 months.
Good, excellent. That was my next question, is to ask you and Mary Jo to put together a presentation or something, kind of come before the council and speak on what the city's path is with regard to economic development for the next 6 to 12 months.
Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Larry, I had discussions with the outgoing Fitchburg State President a few months ago, and it's a concerning Water Street corridor, where the overgrowth is on Water Street, and the fencing that looks pretty bad, in rough shape. I know there's been some talk about gateway beautification, as that's one of our main gateways, and it doesn't look very aesthetically pleasing right now. Is it true that the college has offered to replace that fence, and the city has not accepted that offer?
I have not heard that.
Okay.
I have not heard anything of
Because
that nature.
that was from his mouth directly. that
Okay,
They have reached out to replace that fence, and the city never.
I don't know to whom he communicated that, but I can only tell you that I haven't heard that.
Communicated that to the mayor, but I didn't know if you would have known that, because, of CDBG and the beautification processes, the fact that you don't know. I mean, is there any way you could find out if that's actually the case? I mean,
I will certainly inquire. I will say that we solicited the college's help in maintaining all of the new plantings
Right.
along Main Street.
Yep.
because of the concern that the DPW is already overworked, and to have to, even though they were low-maintenance plants, they still require maintenance, and the president has graciously responded to that request, and he's agreed that, at least for the next 2 years, that they will cover all of the new islands and plantings from Blossom to North Street. So they are doing that for us, and they've always been very open about helping us as a partner in any way that they can. If they've offered help with fencing, that might be an appropriate thing for us to work with them on. We do have some funding as well of our own, and I will follow up with them and see what we can do to work with them.
Yeah, I wanted that to be front and center with that area, because it doesn't look very good. I mean, the brush and the fence is destroyed partially, probably because of the plows and the bad winter we had, but.
You're referring to the area opposite the other, the former.
Right before the old Halloween store, and after, well, if you're coming down, it's after the gas station, the car lot's right there, and then you've got that big strip of fencing and the overgrowth, and then you get to the Halloween costume world. So it's probably a tenth of a mile of space that just looks in really rough shape. So being a gateway area, I hope we're going to be bringing some attention to that area soon.
Take a hard look at that
Thank you.
and get back to you with an answer.
Councilor Boishman.
Larry, I'm sorry to hear what you just told me. Is it because of me going down and bugging you all the time? Do you think I'm about retiring or what?
You drove me out of the city council.
No, but I got a couple questions for you, and it relates not to the budget really. But I do want to ask you, those cameras that are on top of the street, the single lights, are they working or not working? In regards to, we say, Day Street, Water Street, in that area?
They're not working as they're intended right now. And that's because a couple of the old detectors were found to be defective. The original ones, not the new equipment that was installed. And we are getting that equipment repaired now.
Are you going to get it repaired?
Yeah, what's happening is the green time is automatically going to the maximum green time on a couple of the signal phases, and it's not supposed to work that way. It's supposed to work based on the actual traffic volumes, and that's because the detectors are not working.
Okay. The median strip down on North Street, what was the purpose of us putting that there and going all the way past Snow Street?
It was part of the original design that was done by Andrew Leonard and looked at by engineers. We met with the mayor and made a presentation to the council. The principal benefit was that it's a really wide stretch of asphalt, and the idea was it would certainly beautify the area in between and make it a little bit safer than it was. That's essentially the reason why. We also vetted it with the developer who was developing the parcel at North and Main, and they liked it as well.
So, and the only reason why I asked you, because I know we talked about it, and I said, geez, it's quite wide. I mean, and we're pushing everybody over, and then when the cars are coming up Main Street, and when the cars are coming up on North Street, you're almost wiping out you're absolutely wiping out the middle lane. If everybody's in their left lane to take a left to go to Water Street or Laurel Street, there's a big open spot, because I've been there numerous times, and I was going to take pictures to show you what I'm talking about, but I didn't, that there's no cars. And all of a sudden, the line's backed up again, back down to almost North Street, because they can't move, and everybody's got to go to the right. I'm almost tempted to put that petition in, I told you, to make 2 left turns and 2 straight. You know, you can have 2 lanes going left and all go straight. But you asked me to hold off, remember? On that one, on the left there. Because we're missing 15 or 20 cars that can't move, because everybody's in that left lane to go down. And where we put the medium strip, it's so big that they can't stay there. It's almost like this. Like a U. You know what I mean? You can't get by.
I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk a little bit more about it. I'm not sure I exactly understand what you're describing, but I'm happy to talk with you further about it, and if there's a way that we can make that, if there's a real problem there, if there's a way we can fix it, we'll work to fix it.
All right. All right.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry, I won't have to bother bother you that much more about North Street and Main Street? Anytime we bumped into each other, that would be usually part of the conversation. So they're really going at a pretty good clip down at that corner, which is good to see. I wanted to also thank Liz for work on the NICE initiative. I know as a counselor, those meetings are extremely important. Helps us out tremendously about all the different items that are going on. And Councilor Di Natale was talking about the item on Water Street. I'm sure that's on that list that we have, and it's when you go into a meeting like that, you've got an idea of where the problem areas are, and when you leave that meeting, those areas are confirmed to be a pain in the neck, and there might even be some other items that come up too. So it's extremely helpful as a counselor that if somebody calls me up, I have an answer. I've got to be kind of careful on how I deal out any kind of information like that, but somebody could say, I got a problem on such and such a street, and that program can help me out a little bit, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Larry, I've got one concern, is on the Director of Housing and Development. The person who served in that position at the beginning of last year was budgeted at $54,654. You and the mayor, an intern person at $60,313, and will now be coming to $64,505. The same number of people working in your office. I don't see. You may give this person some different responsibilities, but that's a $10,000 increase in that position, in those duties and responsibilities in a year. And I'm going to make a recommendation for a cut, but I want to give you an opportunity to justify that or talk about it.
Certainly. Well, it really isn't the same position. The former housing director worked under the Board of Health and was a supervisor of 2 people and a relatively small budget. The new housing and development director supervises 5 people and a budget that's at least 3 times the size of that other budget, because it includes community development, which is a much larger portion of what we do. For that reason alone, I would say that it's a significantly different position and therefore merits the higher pay.
So was
scale.
somebody not doing the community development work before?
We were short 1 staff person when that person left, so we've had to cover for
When which person left?
when Mr. McNutt left the office.
Yeah, you were short. That I understand. But when Mr. McNutt was there, who was doing the community development portion that you're now saying the new housing director is going to do?
Well, I was principally responsible for that, but then I took on the responsibilities of managing the department and the 3 divisions. So I did not have the same amount of time to supervise those activities.
I'm just having a hard time. I'm seeing you guys are still doing all the same thing. There's nothing different that's being done from my perspective. You're still providing us the same product.
I would also point out to you, Counselor, that the position that we hired to replace Liz is $4,000 less than was budgeted for in that position, so that the actual net payroll really changes by less than $2,000.
That's because that person's coming in new. And Liz,
Yes, absolutely.
And the person, I won't use any names, had accrued time and their salary had gone up.
Absolutely, and I would say to you that the position that Liz's experience and background was significantly different than her predecessors.
Thank you. Councilors, I'm going to make a recommendation that we reduce that position by $6,341 to $58,164, which would have been the old position with a step in COLA increase for the year, which is still a substantial increase. Thank you. Counselor Dean Talley.
I agree with you, Mr. President, about the increase being rather exorbitant as opposed to a lot of others we've seen. Recalling the resumes that we've gotten and the process involved in the hiring, without naming names, I feel the higher salary is justifiable considering the fact that we have someone in that position who I consider to be qualified for the position now, as opposed to the previous person who I did not believe was qualified for the position. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding community and development? Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, councilors.